Thank you for tuning in. Today we're taking a look at digital video planning and buying best practices. In this three-part series, we will cover what marketers and advertisers need to know to be prepared for the growth of digital video in media and advertising. This content is presented by Centro, a provider of digital media software and services. I'm Heather Robertson, Director of Video at Centro. I'm excited to present our special guest, Jim Nail. Jim is Principal Analyst at Forrester. Forrester is a global research and advisory firm serving professionals in 13 key roles across three distinct client segments. It provides proprietary research, consumer and business data, custom consulting, events and online communities, and peer-to-peer executive programs. As Principal Analyst, Jim serves marketing leaders and leads Forrester's coverage of online video, the evolution of TV advertising, the digital transformation of advertising agencies, and marketing optimization. In his 30-year marketing career, Jim has been at the forefront of applying new technology-enabled strategies to marketing. Jim, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So let's first level set with the definition of digital video. From our perspective, the term encompasses video content consumed on any digital screen, whether that's desktop, laptop, smartphone, tablet, gaming console, smart or connected TVs, or over-the-top devices, for example, Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Chromecast.
Yep, I think that's a fair definition today. I think it might get a little bit more complicated in the coming years as we see addressability coming to linear TV, but that's a little bit out there. And there is addressability now on VOD as well, but certainly these are really hot areas growing very quickly and a good place to focus on today to help marketers get up to speed on some of these developments.
Awesome, great. So now that we have that part covered, Jim, perhaps you can describe Forrester's role in researching digital video and take us through some of the numbers in your latest forecast in this area.
Sure, absolutely. Digital video is a big part of my coverage area personally. I serve on the marketing leadership team, so we're writing to those vice presidents and directors of marketing who are putting together these plans. And so I think it's really important for that group to understand how important digital is in consumers' lives, first of all, and how important video is going to be as a part of digital. So we've recently completed this forecast, which is up on the screen now, that shows that within the next couple of years, digital will be as big in the share of budget as television is. And to those of us who spend a lot of time in this space, that's not surprising because we see how important digital is in consumers' lives. They are spending more and more time, they're doing more and more activities, they're researching more and more product purchases. It's really a central part of their lives as much as TV has ever been a central part of consumers' lives. And so marketers need to really think more and more about planning digital and television more holistically rather than thinking of them as very separate kinds of tools to use and therefore planning them very, very separately.
Excellent. And I think you had some thoughts, too, about just the rise in video in general, as you were just speaking to.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. When we break down digital, and particularly display advertising as a piece of digital separate from email or social or mobile, you can see here some numbers that we've projected about the growth of video relative to other kinds of display ad formats. And when you look a little more closely at the numbers beneath the chart, you'll see that by 2016, video will be the largest single piece of the display budget, and then by about 2018, it will be bigger than the rich media and static ads combined. So when you look at combining that idea of digital's importance in consumers' lives and therefore in our media plans, with the growth of video ads as a share of digital, it becomes really critical to think about video in that cross-platform digital mindset, and I would even argue linear, but we'll leave that on the side today. But in order to really optimize the impact of your budget, really think about all the different ways that video can get your message to your target customers.
Excellent. So obviously that's pretty exciting stuff for me as our director of video. From your vantage point, what do you see driving these trends?
There's a lot of things going on, and you'll see, for example, mobile, big topic these days, of course. We can see it every day in our everyday lives, and the way we use our mobile phones changing all the time as they become more and more capable. But video online and video advertising on mobile, we're projecting that to grow about 37% annually for the next 4 or 5 years. And granted, that's starting from a small base today, but it's very quickly at those kind of growth rates going to become a very important place to distribute video advertising. And we can see then, as we start to break that down a little bit further, that about 5 years out, video will be well over half of ads on tablets and just under a quarter of ads on smartphones. So that'll be a big share of all of that kind of media time that consumers are spending.
Okay, that makes sense. So with the rise of mobile and so much talk about how millennials are creating this new generation of consumers, do you often hear or see any assumptions that are being made about how they're just driving this change, just these younger viewers, though in actuality it's really more across a variety of different audiences that are overall watching more and more video across these different screens than they have in the past?
Yeah. Well, that's it's certainly a very, very different kind of behavior between millennials and other generations. And here on this chart, the Gen Y and Gen Z are the two subsegments of the millennials. And you can see very dramatically different levels of watching TV online for Gen Z and Gen Y than even Gen X and certainly boomers and older. It's just a case where this is what they have grown up with. And even Gen Xers and boomers, even though Gen Xers pretty much grew up with computers, but not so much with tablets and smartphones. And boomers, certainly, we didn't grow up with those things. I say we because I am a boomer. But we've learned how to use them. But it's a very, very different thing to learn how to use something later versus you're just a native on that kind of device and that kind of platform. And we've seen it over and over again here at Forrester in different waves of technologies, that kind of behavior difference between the adopters of something and those who are native to it is just a very, very different kind of behavior.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting stuff. And overall, it seems that regardless of our age as consumers, we're just starting to think about TV, and I say that kind of in quotes, a little differently than we did in the past, where it's kind of something that we look at as more of that content type versus just merely a screen, because we know what kind of content we're going to expect on television. It's produced to appeal to a wide variety of viewers, and more than ever before, we just have additional access points to that content. So
That's
can
right.
you speak to any research that you've seen about this shift in behavior as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing greater and greater adoption of these different ways that you mentioned about how to get that content. And what we see in this chart, which comes from our Consumers and Technographics study, is that online video that you've paid to stream from someone like a Netflix or a Hulu Plus is starting to take a significant share of viewing, starting to challenge even the DVR and catching up to broadcast from TV as it airs, the sort of linear world. So consumers are really adopting that and making that a very ingrained part of their video viewing habits.
Yeah, that makes sense. I did notice here, too, that it looks like the video on demand space is lagging just a little behind.
Yeah,
what do you think is causing some of that lag to happen?
Yeah, well, it's one of those things about just the legacy of the TV industry. And if the industry really had its way, we'd still be watching must-see TV at the appointed time on their schedule. It's much easier to sell an advertising audience that way than the way it's going now. And even though video on demand has been around for a number of years, and the distributors and the MVPDs like Comcast and Time Warner have had a VOD offering, they've never really promoted it. Again, the industry wasn't really that interested in encouraging this kind of consumer viewing behavior, so they sort of let it lag. But they've been much more aggressive, particularly Comcast, very recently, as they felt this pressure from Netflix and Hulu and the other streaming services. So they've had to beef up that video-on-demand offering to compete.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. And as a consumer, I think there's a lot of benefit in that, too. So more and more viewers we get into that space. There's also some advantages for advertisers as well, as you mentioned earlier, of the part we're not necessarily talking about today, but more of that addressable type views that we can get to in the future. So, when it comes to all the different content that's out there, curious to get your take on what do you think about some of these, these top shows these days, and what we're seeing kind of change.
Well, in the Game of Thrones that is the advertising business, TV is still the most powerful, despite the fragmenting audiences, despite the lower ratings. Nothing else still delivers that kind of audience and that kind of impact the way television does. But I think we have to be a little careful about the term TV as well. We have to be really careful to differentiate when we're talking about the device, the big screen that sits in our family room or our living room, that is linked to linear delivery, at the time of airing, versus TV content, the programs that, of course, as you mentioned before, Heather, can be distributed and consumed on all sorts of different devices. So here I'm really focused on the power of that content, and I'm not that concerned about the device or what, which pipes and wires it's delivered over. It's the power of that content, the compelling stories, the characters that people really identify with and form a kind of relationship with. That will remain, that will continue to draw viewers and draw audiences that we as marketers want to get our messages to.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. It's all about, the age-old content is king type of idea there, right, where we've got this long-form, professionally produced content that's really still widely sought after, but there's only so much of that exists in the landscape.
Right.
So, I think you over at Forrester, you have some interesting statistics about what type of video content people are consuming online. So can you tell us a little bit more about that, too?
Yeah, absolutely. And in our consumer and technographic surveys, when we asked people about, what types of video they consume on a monthly basis, and as you'll see, and as you said, that sort of traditional long-form kind of programming, current TV shows, movies, and increasingly sort of catch-up viewing of TV shows from previous seasons. Those are still the top things. Again, those compelling stories, those great characters, people really love that. But I was quite surprised when I took a look at the data to see the user-generated content, the YouTube, come up as high as it does. So right there in the number 4 slot. That's a very obviously different form of video, but it's building a nice audience. And within that audience, for any marketer, I'm sure they'll be able to find their audience. And with that level of viewing happening, marketers really need to find out how to include that in their schedule and find the right place for it in that schedule.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to kind of broaden the way that they think about content and the idea of premium content being more about what is everyone watching. It's this greater breadth of what it's historically been in the past. I think you also had some interesting research about just this, more of this explosion of watching short-form video overall too, right? So beyond the long-form professionally produced and maybe somewhere in between of not always amateur or user-generated content, but just overall short-form video.
Yeah, well, that's I think the really important thing about digital video. Traditional TV, of course, is trying to reach a big audience, and so it's designed to appeal to a mass audience. But digital, in all forms, the content can be much more targeted and much more niche, and zero in on certain interests or consumer segments, and the consumers will find the kind of content that really appeals to them. And so we're seeing here, on this chart, this kind of consumption of these clips and shorts and other kinds of programs that are a completely new form of video. They're certainly very well suited to smartphone and the kinds of blank minutes in your day when you're waiting in line at the store or for the bus or what have you. That a couple-minute video is a great way to entertain yourself and keep yourself from getting bored while those things are happening. And you can see here, there's enough of that kind of consumption going on now, and enough people, and again, when you look at the millennials, the numbers are even higher, that in order to have a well-rounded video advertising plan now and in the future, again, marketers need to look at these kinds of short-form types of videos and figure out how to incorporate them into their overall plan and figure out how to then balance this short-form kind of content with that long-form professional and the user-generated content we talked about a minute ago. And I'm particularly fascinated by what's going on in what are called the MCNs, the multi-channel networks, folks like Style Hall and Maker Studios and folks like that, developing some really strong, engaged audiences around very niche topics that, again, when you look at that closely enough, most marketers will find one of those channels or a few of those channels that will be a very good match to their audience.
Agreed. I've seen a couple of those different partners speak on panels at some recent industry conferences and events, and we also at Centro had a few of us attend the Digital Content New Fronts this last spring, and it was really interesting to kind of see all these efforts that are being put out there by these digital publishers toward developing more web-native content, both short-form and long-form, kind of testing out different ways of producing it and releasing it. Agreed. I think I've seen a couple of those MCN partners that you had mentioned at a couple of recent conferences and industry events, speaking a lot about that and what they're doing to develop more and more content for their audiences. At Centro, we also had a few people attend the Digital Content New Fronts last spring, and it was really interesting to see all the efforts that some of these digital publishers are starting to put toward developing more of that web-native content, be it short-form or long-form. And we attended a variety of different presentations from the usual video partners like Hulu or Crackle that is developing more of that long-form episodic content for digital screens, as well as a variety of other publisher partners that are working toward making a better name for themselves in the video space and the partner consideration set for digital video plans. So someone like a Mode Media or a Time Inc. or Wall Street Journal, a couple of those that have previous print ties too. So really interesting stuff happening overall in the marketplace. So
Absolutely.
While there's more and more opportunities than ever to reach your audience because of the power of sight, sound, and motion that video offers in more types of content that reach those people at different times than your traditional primetime viewing hours, we see that this viewing is becoming more and more fragmented, and it creates a challenge for advertisers who are looking to reach their audience in the right place at the right time and in those historically brand safe environments. So curious to get your take on what we see happening from that respect as well.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'm always a glass half full kind of guy. I'm a bit of an optimist by nature. So where people see challenges and this fragmentation, and that certainly makes the traditional way of buying television harder and harder and less relevant in today's world, I do see the good news. I see this ability to deliver that power of sight, sound, and motion in your video advertising to more consumers in more places at different times of the day on these different devices when they're consuming these different types of video content that we just talked about. And so I think overall, when marketers get used to some of these new types of video and can revise the way they plan to bring them into a more integrated video plan, I think they'll see better performance and better results out of their marketing budgets.